Welcome back. I'm your host at Navy Legends, and before we begin, I need you to understand something about what you're about to hear. Not the hardware, not the tactics, the mathematics. Because what happened in the South China Sea on the morning of April 9th, 2026, was not primarily a story about missiles or radar systems or carrier air wings. It was a story about a fundamental shift in the physics of naval power projection. One that strategists have been modeling for 2 decades, and that, on that specific morning, stopped being a model and became a reality. The date is April 9th, 2026. The time is 4:22 local, approximately 390 nautical miles west-northwest of the Philippine island of Luzon, in international waters of the South China Sea. The USS Ronald Reagan, CVN-76, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, is operating as the centerpiece of Carrier Strike Group 5, conducting scheduled freedom of navigation operations in conjunction with a U.S.-Philippine joint maritime exercise designated Operation Balikatan Shield. The carrier is accompanied by her standard strike group screen, the guided missile cruiser USS Antietam, CG-54, the guided missile destroyers USS Benfold, DDG-65, and USS Fitzgerald, DDG-62, and the fast attack submarine USS Cheyenne, SSN-773, running submerged approximately 22 nautical miles ahead of the group on the threat axis. The Ronald Reagan is a city at sea. Her flight deck measures 332 meters. She displaces 104,000 tons at full load. Her embarked air wing, CVW-5, consists of 64 aircraft across 9 squadrons, including 4 squadrons of FA-18E and FA-18F Super Hornets, an EA-18G Growler Electronic Attack Squadron, an E-2D Advanced Hawkeye Airborne Early Warning Squadron, and a mix of MH-60R and MH-60S helicopters. She carries a crew of approximately 5,000 sailors and aviators. She is the most complex weapon system ever constructed by any nation in the history of warfare. She is also the specific system that the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force has spent the last 15 years designing a weapon to kill. The DF-21D, designated by NATO as CSS-5 Mod 4, a medium-range ballistic missile with a maneuvering re-entry vehicle, a MaRV, equipped with a terminal guidance system combining active radar homing, passive infrared imaging, and satellite data link correction. Designed specifically to strike moving surface targets at ranges up to 1,500 kilometers. A weapon so focused in its purpose that analysts gave it a name that became shorthand for an entirely new era of carrier vulnerability. The Carrier Killer. Its warhead weighs 500 kilograms. Its terminal velocity exceeds Mach 10. Its circular error probable against a ship-sized target is approximately 20 meters. At 4:22:14, the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, operating 180 nautical miles ahead of the Reagan on a northeast bearing, callsign Sentry 22, registers a ballistic track rising from the Chinese mainland, specifically from a launch area in Fujian Province, approximately 1,280 kilometers from the current position of the carrier strike group. The track's apogee profile and downrange trajectory are immediately consistent with a DF series medium-range ballistic missile. The E-2D's ADS-18 radar system, operating in a frequency band specifically optimized for ballistic trajectory detection, is painting the track clearly. Within 4 seconds, the contact is being transmitted via tactical data link to every Aegis-equipped ship in the strike group. The tactical action officer aboard the USS Antietam, the strike group's air defense commander, has the track at 4:22:18. 4 seconds after initial detection, his Aegis baseline 9.C2 system has already begun computing an intercept solution. The track's projected impact point is being refined every 0.8 seconds as additional radar data refines the ballistic curve. The solution is stabilizing. The projected impact ellipse, the area within which the warhead is calculated to arrive, is centered 340 meters ahead and 60 meters to the port side of the Reagan's projected position at time of impact. That ellipse has a radius of approximately 45 meters. The Ronald Reagan is inside it. At 4:22:41, 27 seconds after first detection, the Antietam launches her first SM-3 Block IIA interceptor from the forward VLS bank. The SM-3 IIA is the most capable ballistic missile defense interceptor in the U.S. Navy's surface fleet inventory. It burns a 3-stage solid rocket motor to reach exoatmospheric altitudes, then releases a kinetic kill vehicle, the LEAP, lightweight exoatmospheric projectile, which steers itself into the incoming re-entry vehicle using its onboard seeker. No warhead. Pure kinetic energy at closing velocities measured in gigajoules. At 4:22:47, a second SM-3 IIA launches from the Antietam. Then, 6 seconds later, the USS Benfold, 14 nautical miles to the northwest, fires 2 SM-3 IBs in a ripple salvo, an older variant with a shorter engagement envelope, but still capable at this intercept geometry. 4 interceptors in the air. 1 inbound DF-21D MaRV, now descending through 280 kilometers altitude and beginning its terminal guidance phase activation. The MaRV's onboard radar illuminates. It is searching for a target. Specifically, it is searching for a radar return that matches the profile of a Nimitz-class carrier, a profile that has been programmed into its seeker head using data compiled over years of satellite imaging, signals intelligence collection, and PLA Navy reconnaissance operations. At 4:23:19, the Antietam's first SM-3 IIA reaches the intercept window. The LEAP KKV acquires the MaRV and begins its terminal correction burns. Closing velocity, approximately 12.4 kilometers per second. The intercept happens at an altitude of 143 kilometers, 420 kilometers northeast of the strike group. Contact. A clean kill. The MaRV disintegrates in the upper atmosphere. Debris disperses across an area of several hundred square kilometers. No warhead detonation. The strike group erupts in a controlled version of relief. But the TAO on the Antietam does not allow himself to feel it. Because the intelligence assessment that arrived at the strike group 12 hours earlier, a product of NSA signals intercept and NRO satellite coverage of the Fujian launch area, indicated not one DF-21D transporter erector launcher in the operational area. It indicated 9. At 4:24:02, 40 seconds after the first launch, the E-2D Sentry 22 registers 5 additional ballistic tracks lifting from the mainland. 5 simultaneous launches from dispersed TEL positions across a 40-kilometer area, staggered by 8-second intervals. The trajectory solutions begin resolving on the Antietam's combat system. 3 of the 5 tracks are computing impact solutions consistent with the Reagan's projected position. 2 are computing solutions that appear targeted at the strike group's screen ships, specifically at the bearing and range consistent with the Antietam herself and the Benfold. This is the moment that changes everything. The DF-21D salvo has been designed not as a single strike, but as a layered, coordinated attack against the entire strike group architecture. The PLA Rocket Force's engagement concept, developed and refined over 15 years of wargaming and simulation, does not target the carrier in isolation. It targets the carrier's defensive umbrella first. Destroy or degrade the Aegis ships that provide the SM-3 intercept capability, and the carrier becomes significantly more exposed to the follow-on salvo that is almost certainly already in the launch sequence. The Antietam's remaining SM-3 IIA inventory is 6 rounds. She fires 4 against the 3 carrier-targeted tracks, reserving 2. The Benfold fires her remaining SM-3 IBs, 3 rounds, against one of the screen ship-targeted tracks. The USS Fitzgerald, operating 28 nautical miles south of the group, fires 2 SM-3 IAs against the second screen ship-targeted track. The next 48 seconds are the most technically complex defensive engagement attempted by any U.S. Navy strike group in the post-Cold War era. At 4:24:51, the Antietam scores a second clean leap kinetic kill on the leading carrier-targeted track. Altitude, 138 kilometers. Clean intercept. MaRV destroyed. At 4:24:59, the Benfold's SM-3 IIA intercepts the screenship-targeted track, designated for the Antietam. Clean kill. Altitude, 129 kilometers. At 4:25:06, the Antietam scores a third kill. 2 carrier-targeted tracks remain. At 4:25:11, the Fitzgerald's SM-3 IIA misses. The intercept geometry, complicated by the MaRVs terminal maneuver, a 2.3G lateral correction burn at 80 kilometers altitude, takes the re-entry vehicle outside the LEAP KKV's terminal acquisition cone by 340 meters. The KKV passes through empty atmosphere 340 meters from the MaRV and continues ballistically into the upper stratosphere. The Fitzgerald's second SM-3 IIA, fired 4 seconds later as a backup, achieves intercept at 91 kilometers altitude. Kill. The screenship-targeted track is destroyed 19 seconds before projected impact. That leaves 1 carrier-targeted MaRV descending through 60 kilometers altitude, inside the SM-3's optimal engagement envelope, approaching at Mach 10.4. The Antietam has 2 SM-3 IIAs remaining. She fires both in immediate succession. At 4:25:34, the first SM-3 IIA LEAP KKV initiates its terminal correction sequence. The MaRV is executing its own terminal maneuvers, a pre-programmed sequence of lateral and pitch corrections designed to complicate exactly this engagement. The MaRV pulls 4.1 G of lateral correction at 48 kilometers altitude. The LEAP KKV tracks the maneuver and corrects. At 4:25:39, at an altitude of 31 kilometers, the KKV impacts the MaRV's aft body section. Not a direct centerline hit, but a glancing strike that destroys the seeker head and the guidance electronics. The warhead section is still intact. It is no longer guided, but it is still falling. At Mach 9.7, into the South China Sea, toward the last known position of the USS Ronald Reagan. The Ronald Reagan has been maneuvering since the first track was detected. At 4:22:41, simultaneous with the first SM-3 launch, her captain ordered maximum rudder and all available shaft power. She's making 32 knots and executing a continuous 20-degree rudder turn, attempting to move the ship out of the projected impact ellipse. At 104,000 tons, she does not turn quickly, but she turns. Every meter matters. The SM-2 Block 3B rounds from the Reagan's own Mk-29 Sea Sparrow and the Phalanx CIWS are useless against a ballistic warhead at this altitude and velocity. There is no surface-to-air system the carrier herself carries that can engage a DF-21D in its terminal phase. She is entirely dependent on the destroyers and cruiser to protect her. The destroyers and cruiser have done everything they were designed to do. At 4:25:52, 1 minute and 38 seconds after the first SM-3 launch, the inert, unguided warhead section of the DF-21 DMARV impacts the South China Sea at a terminal velocity of approximately Mach 6.8, having bled off speed during the descent following the loss of its aerodynamic control surfaces. It impacts 870 meters off the USS Ronald Reagan's port bow. 870 meters. At that range, the impact of a 500-kilogram tungsten-encased warhead striking water at Mach 6.8 generates a pressure wave equivalent to a subsurface explosion of approximately 380 kilograms of TNT. The wave reaches the Reagan's hull at reduced but measurable intensity. Sensors in the hull detect a 0.3 G shock impulse. No structural damage. No flooding. No casualties. The flight deck camera system, which has been running continuous recording throughout the engagement, captures the column of water rising to approximately 280 meters. A white column against the pre-dawn darkness of the South China Sea. 870 meters to port. The crew of the Ronald Reagan knows exactly how close it was. But this is not the end of the engagement. It is the beginning of its second phase. At 4:26:17, while the water column from the near miss is still visible, the USS Cheyenne, running submerged 22 nautical miles ahead of the group, reports contact. Specifically, the Cheyenne's AN/BQQ-10 sonar array has detected the acoustic signatures of 3 Type 055 Ren high-class guided missile destroyers, the PLA Navy's most capable surface combatants, operating without active sonar at a range of approximately 58 nautical miles on a bearing of 047 degrees. The Type 055s are running at 12 knots on a course consistent with the closing intercept of the strike group. They have been positioned ahead of the ballistic missile salvo. They are part of the same operational plan. The engagement has been coordinated between the PLA Rocket Force and the PLA Navy Surface Force. The ballistic missiles were designed to degrade the strike group's SM-3 inventory and force defensive maneuvering. The Type 055s are designed to exploit the window that follows. A strike group that has expended much of its ballistic missile defense inventory is maneuvering defensively, and whose commanding officer must now simultaneously manage surface threat, potential follow-on ballistic salvos, and a crew at General Quarters that has just watched a DF-21D land 870 meters from their flight deck. The Reagan's strike group commander, operating from the carrier's Flag Operations Center, makes his decision in under 90 seconds. Under the updated Rules of Engagement framework governing U.S. forces in the South China Sea theater, a coordinated ballistic missile attack against a U.S. carrier strike group, followed by the positioning of surface combatants on an intercept course, constitutes an unambiguous act of warfare. No further authorization is required. The strike group commander is authorized to respond with full offensive capability. At 4:29:44, 7 minutes and 30 seconds after the first DF-21D launch, the strike group commander orders an immediate multi-domain response. The execution is simultaneous across every platform in the group. The USS Cheyenne fires 4 UUM-44 sub-rock anti-submarine weapons toward the bearing of the Type 055 formation, then immediately begins repositioning. She also initiates a UGM-109 Tomahawk strike package, 6 rounds targeted against pre-planned land-based aim points, the PLA Rocket Force TEL assembly and maintenance facility in Fujian Province, the over-the-horizon radar installation on the Paracel Islands that provides targeting data to the DF-21D guidance network, and the PLA Navy Forward Logistics node on Woody Island. The USS Antietam and Benfold fire coordinated volleys of RGM-109 surface-launched Tomahawks, 8 from the Antietam, 6 from the Benfold, against the same land target set. Time to arrive within a 4-minute window, and then the flight deck of the USS Ronald Reagan opens. At 4:31:02, the first F/A-18F Super Hornet of VFA-102 launches off Cat 1 at full military power plus afterburner, climbing northeast into the pre-dawn sky. 16 seconds later, a second Super Hornet launches off Cat 2. The carrier's 4 catapults begin a sustained launch cycle, 2 aircraft airborne every 32 seconds. Within 11 minutes, 14 FA-18Es and FA-18Fs are airborne, along with 2 EA-18G Growlers from VAQ-136, tasked with electronic attack support. The air wing is armed with AGM-158C LRASM, the long-range anti-ship missile, 4 per aircraft on the strike-tasked Super Hornets. The 3 Type 055 destroyers, running at 12 knots on their intercept course, become the primary naval target. At 4:47:19, 18 minutes after launch authorization, 25 minutes after the DF-21D salvo, the first wave of LRASMs arrives over the Type 055 formation. The LRASM is a low observable GPS/INS/EO guided anti-ship cruise missile with a 450-kilogram penetrating warhead and an autonomous terminal seeker that selects its own aim point on the target vessel after conducting an assessment of the ship's radar signature and vulnerable areas. It approaches at low altitude, 15 meters above the sea surface, in a sea-skimming profile that minimizes radar detection time. The first Type 055, the lead ship of the formation, is engaged by 6 LRASMs simultaneously, arriving from 3 different bearings. Her HHQ-10 short-range defense system engages 2 of them. Her H/PJ-11C IWS engages a third. 3 LRASMs impact within 4.7 seconds of each other. The first hits the bow section forward of the main VLS battery. The second hits amidships, above the waterline, penetrating to the engine room. The third, which the ship's automated defense systems have deprioritized due to the simultaneous track load, impacts the bridge superstructure. The Type 055 is catastrophically damaged. She goes dead in the water within 90 seconds of the first impact, with fires visible across her entire midship section. The second Type 055 engages the incoming LRASMs more effectively. Her crew has had 4 additional seconds to react, and her HHQ-10 and CIWS systems account for 4 of the 8 missiles targeted against her. 4 impact. 2 on the forward hull section, 1 amidships, 1 against the after VLS bank. She is heavily damaged but does not immediately lose propulsion. The third Type, 055, positioned farthest from the strike group, running at the trailing edge of the formation, receives the smallest missile allocation, 4 LRASMs. Her defensive systems account for 2. 2 impact. 1 on the forward superstructure, 1 on the aft deck near the helicopter hangar. She is damaged but operationally functional, and at 4:51:33, she executes an emergency rudder reversal and begins withdrawing northeast at maximum speed, trailing smoke from her aftersection. The Tomahawks from the Cheyenne, Antietam, and Benfold arrive over their land targets beginning at 5:18:44. 52 minutes after the DF-21D salvo, 27 minutes after launch, the TEL assembly facility in Fujian takes 4 direct hits from Tomahawk Block 5 rounds. The satellite-guided weapons achieve CEPs between 2.8 and 4.1 meters. The facility, a concrete reinforced structure housing mobile launcher maintenance and pre-launch preparation, is structurally destroyed. Fires visible in post-strike imagery burn for 11 hours. The over-the-horizon radar installation on the Paracel Islands takes 3 Tomahawk hits. The primary antenna array is destroyed. The associated power generation facility is destroyed. The installation is mission killed. The Woody Island logistics node takes 3 hits against 2 of 6 designated aim points. Here the fog of war enters cleanly and without apology. 1 Tomahawk experiences a data link dropout during its terminal approach, caused by electronic jamming emanating from a PLA electronic warfare system operating from the island. A jamming profile that had not been pre-identified in the strike package intelligence. The round's GPS guidance degrades. Its terrain-following backup system searches for a matching terrain signature and settles on a secondary geographic feature 410 meters east of the intended aim point. It detonates in an open area adjacent to the logistics compound, causing no assessed damage to the primary target structures. A second Tomahawk targeting the island's fuel storage area detects, via its onboard camera, using the digital scene matching area correlator, that the fuel storage tanks have been emptied and moved since the pre-strike imagery was captured. The tanks are no longer at the coordinates. The DSMAC system identifies the discrepancy and initiates an abort protocol. The round climbs, loiters, and impacts a barren area of the island's eastern shoreline with no effect on assessed military infrastructure. 2 misses out of 20 attempted strikes. The PLA's dispersal and deception operations have partially worked, but only partially. The TEL facility is gone. The OTH radar is gone. The Type 055 lead ship is sinking. At 6:44, the strike group's post-engagement assessment is complete. The Ronald Reagan has sustained no damage. The Antietam, Benfold, and Fitzgerald have sustained no damage. The Cheyenne is repositioning submerged. The strike group's SM-3 inventory has been substantially depleted. The Antietam has expended all but 2 of her ballistic missile defense interceptors. The group is tactically and strategically in a degraded defensive posture against any follow-on ballistic missile salvo for the next 72 hours, until a logistics support vessel can conduct a VLS reload operation. That 72-hour window is what the PLA's planners were counting on. The Chinese Foreign Ministry releases a statement describing the DF-21D launches as a defensive warning exercise in response to provocative U.S. operations, without acknowledging the Type 055 formation or the warhead that impacted 870 meters from a U.S. carrier. The U.S. National Security Council convenes at 6:15 Washington time. The Tomahawk strikes represent the calibrated response, measured, targeted at military infrastructure. They are also exactly what PLA wargamers modeled for a decade. What China has not practiced absorbing is what a B-2 Spirit delivers when fully authorized. That conversation defines the moment. Here at Navy Legends, we analyze the tactical layer so you can understand the strategic one. What happened on April 9th, 2026, was a live-fire validation of 15 years of PLA Rocket Force doctrine. A doctrine that says a carrier can be suppressed by exhausting its interceptor inventory and forcing it onto Beijing's timeline. The Ronald Reagan survived. The SM-3 IIA achieved 4 out of 5 intercepts. But one MaRV reached 870 meters from the flight deck in a 6-missile salvo, after all 4 Aegis ships fired everything they had. The next salvo might be 12. After that, 24. Each DF-21D costs $5 to $10 million to produce. Each SM-3 IIA costs $27 million. Magazine depth is finite. PLA Rocket Force launch capacity is not. The deterrence logic of the carrier strike group was built on the assumption that no adversary possessed a weapon fast enough to threaten the ship itself. That assumption held for 80 years. On April 9th, 2026, it was tested. The carrier survived. The deterrence framework did not emerge unscathed. Stay informed. Stay vigilant.